Hi everyone, today let's talk in a very detailed discussion of Danmachi Sword Oratoria Volume 15 Epilogue, and how would Loki react when Raul and Lafaya delivers the news of the expedition of Loki. Familia has failed, and they had been WipeOut in 60th floor, leaving sweat-stained red on their faces, unable to soothe their uncontrolled breathing, trampling the sacrifices that lay at their feet. Raul and Lafaya ran desperately uphill, climbing the stairs. Not to waste the sacrifices already made, to hold on to the belief that they could still recover something. They all suppressed their tears as they moved toward the light, towards that earthly glow that never penetrates the cruel labyrinth. As soon as they emerged from the dungeon and reached the first floor of Babel, Raul vomited as if a chronic illness had suddenly come to him. While the other members exhausted and fell to the ground, Raul, bearing the full weight of the responsibility of the decision, could not contain the pain and regret, and emptied his stomach. The others, with his short breath, didn't blame him for his unpleasant behavior. Not even Lafia, who was shaking on his knees with his hands grounded on the ground, could curse the consequences of that decision. The decision to leave their comrade and plead to the surface. As they arrive, other adventurers seen them. The Loki family. What just happened? They are completely destroyed. Hey, get out the way. Transport the seriously injured immediately. Use the tower facilities. Hurry up! The appearance of the broken and mischievous Loki family coming out of the spiral stairs surprised not only the adventurers who had crossed them in the dungeon, but also the unsuspecting who were on the surface. Thanks to Fels's quick maneuvers, who, upon learning of the failure of the expedition and withdrawal, had mobilized everything, only the Ganesha Familia and the unchecked Familia previously informed and moved away from the crowd to begin the relocation of the injured members. The scene of that defeated army was overwhelmingly heartbreaking. The gaze of the adventurers watching from afar were so hurtful that Lafia could not stand them and looked away. Is that all of them that had survived? Where are the others? Leaning on the ground, Lafia with trembling hands, somehow he managed to get up, and then she saw her. It was his goddess Loki, who had probably been waiting all this time for his followers to return. Loki's crimson eyes welled upon noticing how few they had survived since leaving more than 10 days ago, and he headed straight towards one particular person. Not towards the severely injured who could not even speak, nor towards Lafaya, whose anguish seemed to tear her apart, but towards Raul, who was still vomiting. And he bowed down on one knee to the new commander, the young man who had made the rightest decision and at the same time the heaviest of all, abandoning even Finn and the others to bring his teammates back to the surface. She slowly stretched her hand towards the young man's shoulder to comfort him. But just at that moment, Raul opened his eyes at once, and gathering the few remaining forces, he pulled away the hand of his goddess from a clap. Loki's eyes just opened in surprise. Even Lafia was stunned. The backlash of the blow caused drops of blood to shoot from Raul's wound, staining the Loki's cheek. With tears stained red from his suppressed despair, Raul looked up into the distance, as if he was looking for something. Not yet. Not yet. I still have some things to do. There was a responsibility I had to fulfill, something I had to carry to the end, even if it was in a miserable way. Lafia was sure she heard that silent cry. The young man pushed Loki away with a push, stood up and wobbly forward. Their goal was the stairs leading up, towards the first floor of Babel, where the presence of a son, incapable of becoming a blessing, was felt. Loki kept silent and watched him without saying a word. Lafia gritted her teeth strongly and followed Raul's back, miserable but full of dignity. Members who could still move also moved their trembling limbs and kept moving as if they were corpses. They climbed the stairs one by one, stepping heavily, heading towards the light, from where an incredible commotion came from. Upon reaching the end of the stairs, as if they were crawling, they encountered a scene of absolute chaos. The expedition failed. The Loki Familia, Hephaestus, and Sect's members were there too, weren't they? Where they are. Are these people the only ones who managed to escape and return? The chaos, confusion, and screams were even bigger than on the first floor of the maze. The adventurers who heard the tremor were filled with awe, fear, and rage. Despite the desperate attempts by the pale guild staff to calm them down, people kept gathering, and the scene was on the brink of panic, with screams and lamentations filling the place. The injured lying near the stairs waited their turn to use the elevator. Members of the Loki Familia lying on the floor to be taken to the upstairs clinic bid farewell to a strong iron odor. Their teammates were soaked in fresh blood. The group was completely beaten, riddled with injuries, and some had even lost body parts. The group's flag, which before the match waved with so much gallantry, was now shattered and damaged, swinging like a crying clown. And then, the expedition failed. The expedition has failed. Alliance of Families has been annihilated on the 60th floor. In the midst of chaos, Raul cried out. Covered in blood, he clung to his injured arm, and with an expression that seemed like it was going to collapse at any moment, he continued to plead. With eyes injected with blood and tears falling from them, he set aside pride and shame, raising a voice that ripped tears, while facing the consequences of his decision and the result he had to face. He shouted, "Quick, we need backups. Our comrades, commanders, are still in the deepest floors." In the face of that desperate cry, time seemed to have stood still in the Tower of Babel. The pain in Raul's screams and the stagnation of the world in silence consumed Lafia's heart. Ice was not there. Riveria wasn't there either. Tiona and Tione also were not there. Neither Finn, nor Gareth, nor Beat, nor Anakiti, nor the rest was there. There were only Lafia and a few who, after abandoning their companions, with whom they had shared joys and sorrows, fled back. The eyes of the people around them were full of condemnation. The world itself seemed to mark them with the loser's label. An overwhelming feeling of powerlessness and defeat invaded Lafia again, as if to drown her, and the accumulated tears of frustration threatened to spill from her eyes. Despair befall upon all of them, but Lafia didn't do that. She didn't accept despair. She set it in her mind. The great heroes were no longer there. Even when the rest of the group collapsed, with their faces down and their gaze lost on the ground, Lafia never bowed his head. Because deep inside her was anger. In the center of her abdomen, where scorching heat emerged so intense that it seemed to melt even the bleeding wounds, there was a spark, a point of ignition that prevented Lafia from becoming a miserable child. That anger flashed into Lafia's field of vision with irritating clarity, as he saw a guy was standing there. It was Bell, and his white hair had stopped with time, and those crimson eyes stared at her, filled with wonder. The only adventurer who continued to receive the teachings of his longing. A new hero getting closer and closer to the great heroes. Lafia said, "Not yet. This isn't over." Lafia knew the name of that anger. It was called hope. Crimson and sapphire eyes met, reflecting a ray of hope in her pupils. Never bending her knees, clenching her fists with strength, the fairy vowed to remain unyielding. Then he declared, "The great flame of white light, and the fairy's roar will end the disaster and launch the counterattack."